You may be seated. This past January, 23 members of Minyan Katan traveled to Barbados, a beautiful Caribbean island. The centerpiece of the group's time in Barbados was a Shabbaton at the historic congregation Nidchei Yisrael, which today is affiliated with the conservative Masorti movement. Today, Minyan Katan members Terry Schwartz-Russell, Barbara Posnick, Carolyn Schwartz, and Bob Ressman-Halpern will share some of their experiences from this trip. Terry will begin. Welcome.
Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom.
So how many people like to travel? How many people, when they go places, look for something Jewish? Okay, so that's the story. So as the rabbi said, this past January, 23 members of Minyan Katan traveled to Barbados. However, there's lots more members of Minyan Katan, so everybody who is a member of Minyan Katan, please stand up, wave, hi, whatever. Okay. Those who didn't go on the trip, sit down. Okay. All right, so now you know who went, whatever. So before I tell you a little bit about our trip to Barbados for our Shabbaton, I want to give you a little background about our group, about Minyan Katan, because when we came back in January, all these people said, so you went, and how was it, and blah, 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 and then people said, so what's Minyan Katan? So I've been amazed to find out that so many people don't know about us. So Minyan Katan, which means a small minyan, is an alternative, independently led group interested in doing Jewish together, whether through prayer, holiday, and Shabbat celebration, food, music, etc. Our gatherings and spirited services on Shabbat and holidays are often held at Temple Emunah or in members' homes. Minyan Katan is an integral part of Temple Emunah. So our holidays and Shabbat services are led by our members and feature a group discussion based on the Torah portion, may include nigunim and meditation. We also hold several Kabbalat Shabbat, Havdalah, and holiday celebrations throughout the year in members' homes, with musical accompaniment and a potluck meal. Our group is open to all Emunah members or folks who wish to join us, so feel free to contact any of the people that you saw standing up if you're interested. Over the 40 years of our group's existence, we have also traveled together to New York City, London, and this year to Barbados to meet with and celebrate Shabbat with new Jewish communities. Our Minyan Katan members were excited to spend Shabbat with this small Jewish community in Barbados. There are 50 individual members of this synagogue on the whole island. The total island population is 270,000. And we were honored to lead Shabbat morning services in their historic synagogue. So how did we end up in Barbados? For the past few years, I've been working in Hebrew College's Adult Learning Department, helping to coordinate adult learning courses for the greater Boston community. One of our instructors, Rabbi Lenny Gordon, told me he was hired by the Barbados Jewish community to serve as their rabbi during tourist season, when they get the most of their visitors from cruise ships, etc. He would be there during January and February at this 365-year-old synagogue, a UNESCO World Heritage Site. Shortly after hearing this, we had a Minyan Katan gathering where I mentioned the idea of our group traveling in January away from winter and the cold to a warm Caribbean island with a synagogue, Jewish museum, a cemetery, and a recently discovered mikveh that we could visit over Shabbat. There was immediate interest from about 20 people, and within a week, the planning had begun. Who wouldn't want to be somewhere warm in January? So I took on the task of coordinating our visit with the synagogue and spent many an email and phone conversations with Neil Rechtman, who is not only the synagogue president, but also the tour guide for the synagogue. If Neil is zooming into services with us this morning, I want to express our deepest appreciation to him and to Rabbi Gordon for all their help in making our visit go smoothly. We thank Neil for his warm welcome to our group, for his amazing historical knowledge of the Jewish community of Barbados. And when I mentioned that our minyan regularly held and led Shabbat morning services, he invited us to take over the shul on Shabbat morning to lead services from Matovu to Adon Olam. While we all enjoyed spending time together separately, going to beaches and snorkeling and taking painting classes, visiting beautiful botanical gardens, eating good food, etc., the highlight and centerpiece of the week was our Shabbaton at this synagogue. So a little brief history about the synagogue. Nidchei Israel Yisrael Synagogue is a UNESCO heritage site which dates from 1654 and is believed to be the oldest synagogue in the Western Hemisphere. The synagogue was originally founded by Sephardic Jews who arrived via ship fleeing the Spanish Inquisition after being expelled by the Portuguese from Recife, Brazil. These Jews were welcomed to Barbados because they brought with them basically a complete more modern sugar factory and led the way in developing and expanding this main economy on the island. Eventually, there is a sugarcane crisis and the whole economy collapses, as well as a major hurricane, which destroyed much of the island. This led to the Jewish community once again picking up and moving away. Years later, Ashkenazi Jews fleeing the Holocaust landed in Barbados, another amazing story, and took over the synagogue, establishing a new community. These Jews were allowed to settle in Barbados and given their freedom by none other than the British leader Oliver Cromwell. This was quite unusual, as this was the first legal Jewish settlement anywhere in the British domain since the Jews were expelled by the British monarchy in 1920. Of course, there are many stories behind what I've just shared, too many to go into this morning. The synagogue and the whole compound and the story of how it came to be is amazing. While we cannot share the whole history, it's worth hearing. And there's a wonderful virtual tour of Jewish Barbados that Neil Reckman, the president, gives that you can watch on YouTube. We encourage you also to visit if you're ever in Barbados, and Rabbi Lenny Gordon will be back there again this year. They liked him so much, they hired him again. It's also one of the island's top tourist attractions. Just one final story, and then I'll pass it off to Barbara. The inside of Nidchei Yisrael Sanctuary is constructed mainly of beautiful native-grown mahogany. Nowadays, this wood is not generally available. However, one group of Minyan Katan folks, the car was driven by Dave Waldman, went on a search all over the island to help Hal Miller-Jacobs source some of this wood. So Hal subsequently created this beautiful set of candlesticks, which are now proudly on display in my home. So now I'd like to welcome Barbara, who will share some of her Barbados experience.
The past 24 hours had been a whirlwind. Arriving in Barbados, settling into our houses, figuring out logistics, death-defying drives through narrow streets on the left side of the street. Thank you to our designated drivers. Shopping for groceries, and taking in the sights of the beautiful island. There was excitement, energy, and a sense of adventure, exploring somewhere new. But amidst the busyness, I felt the pull toward the quiet of Shabbat. When we walked into the synagogue courtyard that evening, something shifted for me. The noise of the day quieted, a feeling of peace came over me, and I felt a sense of coming home. Maybe it was because the warm climate, stone buildings, and the smells of tropical plants reminded me of Israel. But I think it was more than that. I felt a deep connection being in that space with the synagogue, the mikveh, the Jewish cemetery with generations of Jewish Barbados residents, and a connection that deepened the more I learned about the history and the stories of the Jews of Barbados. The congregation gathered for Shabbat services was a mix of Armenian Katan group, year-round Barbados residents, seasonal residents, and visitors from around the world. Of course, we played Jewish geography and found some connections. On Friday night, Rabbi Gordon led the service, and he included many members of the congregation in leading prayers and doing readings, including several members of our Minyan Katan group. We felt very welcomed. The acoustics of the room are wonderful, and our voices rang together in prayer and song. Praying in that beautiful historic synagogue with the mahogany ark, mahogany reading table, benches facing each other, it felt to me like a bridge between the past and the present, between those who had gathered there in the past in past generations and those who continue to keep the synagogue alive. The Jewish community in Barbados has always been small, and perhaps that is what made it even more powerful to me, knowing that small numbers of Jews in centuries before and in the current time make it a priority to come together as a community and to build and maintain a synagogue. After services Friday night, we went to the courtyard for Kiddush and schmoozing, and we enjoyed delicious homemade challah made by a member of the congregation. It was warm and a wonderful, wonderful evening. We continued with Shabbat dinner and went home. On Shabbat morning, as Terry said, Minyan Katan led the services, with many members of our group taking part. I had the honor of starting off by leading Pesukei de Zimra. It's a role that I often take on here, and one that I enjoy. But leading in Barbados was different and very special. It was truly an honor to lead services in a historic synagogue that doesn't usually have Shabbat morning services. It felt like we were taking part in breathing life into a sacred space and contributing to its continued vibrancy. As I sat in the congregation for the rest of the service, I kept saying to myself, Am Yisrael Chai, people of Israel live. And I continue to hold on to the connection I felt that Shabbat to Jewish people, to my people, across time and space, planting roots and flourishing in communities large and small. I'd like to invite up Carolyn Schwartz to share her thoughts.
Thank you. I'm not usually a group travel kind of person. My last experience with group travel was a 10-day backpacking trip in the Grand Canyon with my high school senior class. The cliques and mean-spirited pranks were enough to keep me, for me to swear off group travel for life. But somehow this Minyan Katan trip idea seemed like a whole nother breed of group travel. For one, it was centered around Shabbat in a country I'd never thought of as having a Jewish presence. The Barbados Jewish community reflects the long and repeated history of the challenges of many Jewish communities being forced to restart after being exiled from their previous home. The surprising archaeological discovery and renewal of this Jewish presence stay with me still. They give me hope for our people. For another, the exquisite organization by Terry, Barbara, Marcy, and Kathy of the many necessary details of travel, as well as a wide range of activities, was very tempting. We could choose to participate in tours in submarine, cave, or chocolate factory. We could enjoy the outdoors via sailing and snorkeling on a catamaran and visiting more than one botanical garden. We could join group dinners in local restaurants and the Barbados Chabad House. All was made easier because someone else organized it. We just had to sign up. In the generous, unscheduled time that remained, my husband David and I got to know our travel partners in unrushed Barbados time. In larger group events or smaller excursions by our house buddies, we shared stories from our lives. We explored the novelty of a Barbados supermarket, cooked together, tasted the Barbados rum, and protected each other from sunburn. We relished the feeling of fine white sand between our toes and soaked in the turquoise blue-green of the Caribbean Sea. We had adventures looking for mahogany, for Hal's candlesticks, and watching the green monkeys, peacocks, tortoises, and alligators at the wildlife reserve. If you would like to see some of the beauty we beheld, come say hi at the Kiddush, and we'll show you a photo book of our trip. The bonds formed were particularly meaningful to us as new members of the Temple Amuna community. We're grateful to have been able to participate in this Minyan Katan adventure and look forward to the next one. And now I'd like to welcome Bob to share his experiences.
When I visit a city or country for the first time, one of my favorite activities is to go for an early morning walk to get a sense of the place. And in Barbados, that meant going out pretty much every morning for 4 or 5 miles along the beach, down small and large streets, into stores and hotels. As I get my daily dose of exercise, I'm also an amateur naturalist, historian, and sociologist. A few examples. Along the beach, I came across this small, stunning yellow crab. You probably can only see if you're close to the front. The cutest eyes staring back at me from under a rock. On the main road, back on the main road, I came across this tsunami evacuation map, which was very prominently displayed. It was very large. And that was a little scary because our beautiful cottage was less than 100 feet from the ocean. I took a picture of this specifically in case we should need it. And I thought to myself, that cute little crab is much more likely to survive any tsunami than I am. I set my GPS and headed to the oldest church in Barbados, where I noted there was a monument put up in 1905 commemorating the original settlement of the English in 1605, so the 300th tercentenary anniversary of the first landing of the English in 1605. And now, more than 100 years after that plaque was created, and Barbados has been independent for more than 50 years, as I walked, I could still see many signs of English culture. The school uniforms, the British spellings, as was mentioned, the drivers on the left-hand side of the road. I was particularly interested in this historian's and as well as sociologist's perspective on the island. My daughter happens to be a scholar of settler colonialism around the world, and she would say, she might observe, and this was my observation to some extent, that the Barbadian economy feels a little bit like it was built on a philosophy of what my daughter calls hierarchical coexistence. Some are on the top, and others are intended to be on the bottom. This was most obvious as I walked as an old, bald, white guy. I could easily walk without being questioned into the most luxurious resort on the island. I appreciated the neatly combed beach, the polished marble, the exquisite floral arrangements. I took advantage of the beautiful bathroom with cloth towels. I noted that virtually all the guests were white, in a country where the population is predominantly of African ancestry. In contrast, I walked down the main road early in the morning while most tourists were still sleeping and saw crowded, rickety buses, taxis, and bikes either speeding or crawling along, bringing an army of service workers, all black as far as I could see, to serve the wealthy visitors like me. I know that tourism is the main business of this developing economy, and I did appreciate that I was in a small way supporting these workers. However, I couldn't help but think that it is a world of vast income inequality that enables luxury for some and subsistence-level jobs for many others, a divide in black and white. I have time in these walks to slow down, think big thoughts, and appreciate the smallest details. I'm looking forward to future Minyan Katan trips as well as Temple Amuna trips where I'll get to do similar walks. Shabbat Shalom.
Yasher Koach to Terry, to Barbara, to Carolyn, and to Bob. Thank you so much for sharing about your adventures with us.